Good evening. Facebook, YouTube says that I am live. Trying to find out how to brighten my. It's dimmed out on me. Don't know why, but anyway, what did I want to talk about tonight? Um, Everything in general, and nothing in particular. I wanted to talk about the fact that just the way the world is right now and how I'm feeling with respect to where everything is. And it's a bit of an unsettled time because I almost feel like the ground is steadying under my feet for the first time in 2 years. Watching things like the Blue Jays and seeing that they're going to the postseason, hoping they're going to host. It looks like Seattle. Uh, you know, I had always have always been going back to my teenage years. I've always been a big baseball fan, so seeing the Blue Jays get into the postseason, and I still keep an eye on the box scores and know what the players are batting and what how many wins the pitchers have, and I like their chances and what have you. These are the kind of things that make it doesn't have to be baseball, but these are things that make life worth living. Your interests, your passions, your you know life isn't just about eating, sleeping, and working, which for the past 2 years, for too much of the past 2 years, that go back, go back to March of 2020, and the Thursday prior to everything locking down, I believe it was a Thursday, the church I attend had the youth group hosted a soup tasting event, and all the youth group members had made their soups, and then we all went and tasted them and voted for the best one. Just a fun community event. And in March, people had vacations planned, they had weddings planned, they had all manner of things planned. Students were looking forward, senior students in high school were looking forward to their graduations and their proms, or convocation for university students. And everything got taken away. And we endured 2 years of very unsettled times. And what bothers me most is that you weren't allowed to question anything. If you asked questions, you were shouted down. Not just forget, the heavy hand of government and censorship and everything like that. Even just the general population would not tolerate any questioning whatsoever. It took on almost a cult-like religious, you're a heretic for daring to question. And that drove me crazy because I did question things right off the hop. I questioned the wisdom of doing so much damage in an effort to control a viral pathogen, especially one that seemed to be so narrowly focused on one specific demographic, those already at the end of natural life expectancy, and especially if they already had serious and often terminal underlying health issues. That was and is the demographic for whom COVID can be incredibly serious. But there was this, it's like it was one size fits all. You weren't allowed to question anything, and that was unsettling. You'll recall that you were not allowed to question the origins of SARS-CoV-2. It came from a wet market in Wuhan, China, and no discussion was allowed. One of the first individuals to question that official narrative was a Nobel Prize virologist from France by the name of Luc Montagnier, and he became, a total quack overnight because his research and observation of the virus indicated to him, with his expertise, that this virus was not naturally occurring, that this virus showed what to him looked like clear signs of human manipulation, that it came out of a lab. Shut down. And to a degree, I think in a fashion, we were already conditioned for this idea that you're not allowed to question things. If you went back, it happened actually during the COVID pandemic when the US had their election in 2020. And Joe Biden won the election and president of the US. But the way it works in the US, I don't know the date in November, that's when the vote is held, but then the president is inaugurated until I believe it's February of the following year. So in November, Biden defeated Trump, and in February he was inaugurated. But in that intervening time, some people had the temerity, the gall, the wherewithal to question the results, but you were not allowed. You were not allowed to question the results. And it gets to something I've spoken about before, and that's this notion that an absence of evidence does not mean evidence of absence, which is a bit of a convoluted saying. But if you break it down in the context of the US election, since nobody has been able to prove definitively that there was fraudulent activity that led to Joe Biden winning the election, since there is no definitive proof, then that, they will tell us, proves that the election was legitimate. In other words, failing to have any evidence means that you're making a false allegation. I questioned, personally, to just full disclosure, I do not care for Donald J. Trump, and I think Joe Biden is one man's opinion. I think the guy is beyond addled. I think his choo-choo train has left the tracks, more than gone off the tracks. I think he's derailed completely. I mean, 335 million people, and those were your choices. And the simple fact of the matter is that no U.S. president in history who ran for re-election, so 200 plus years of American history of sitting presidents running for re-election, not once had a sitting president running for re-election ever lost an election in which his vote count increased from his first election to the second election. Every president whose votes went higher won, except for Trump. Now, just because it never happened before doesn't mean it can't happen again. But if you'll remember the night of whatever night it was in November, everyone went to bed with Donald Trump leading by hundreds of thousands of votes in all the key battleground states like Indiana and Pennsylvania. I think Wisconsin might have been another one. He was ahead in all of them. And then everyone went to bed, and you woke up in the morning and you found out that a bunch of mail-in ballots came in overnight, and that the results in all these battleground states had flipped. Another editorial comment. Politics is a dirty game. Do I think the Democrats cheat? Sure. Do I think the Republicans cheat? Sure. And I think it's very possible that the Democrats just did a better job of cheating than the Republicans did. Or than, the Republican president running for re-election did. I just, I question it. Can I prove it? No, can't prove it. So the media, anyone puts forward the idea that that there was fraud or that there were irregularities or that the election was somehow stolen, that is false. And I'll put it this way. Imagine, if you will, going back to the 12th or early in the 13th century, in the 1300s or early 1400s, someone standing on the shores of Portugal or Spain or France or Great Britain and looking westward out across the Atlantic Ocean. And if someone said, there's another continent out there, there's an undiscovered world, a new world exists that we don't know anything about. In the context of today's world, that would be declared false information because you can't prove it. Someone might say, well, I heard about some Vikings. It's in their lore that they've been across it. Well, can you prove it? Well, then it's false. Absence of evidence means evidence of absence. And that's the kind of world we've devolved into, where you're not allowed to question anything. And the scariest notion of it all is how it's not the authorities that have to police this. We do it to ourselves. We don't allow, if someone says, I think Donald Trump won the election, I think there was some monkey business going on with those mail-in ballots, you're shut down by a large segment of the population. Likewise, I'll throw it into the COVID era, full-on COVID era, talking about COVID. The accepted mantra is now, and you hear it in the press all the time, that masks are a proven and effective tool to control or limit the spread of SARS-CoV-2, to mitigate against cases of COVID. Masks are proven and effective. Not allowed to say anything beyond that. And I think that's fitting in today's world, given that, with Twitter being 248 characters or something, anything longer than 2 or 3 sentences, and our capacity to process the information is nil. It's got to be short and sweet to be true. And I'm willing to. Are masks an effective tool for mitigating viral spread? I believe they can be. Absolutely, which might surprise some. Wait a minute, I thought you didn't like masks. Well, the devil is in the details. And 1, has to be the proper type of mask. 2, it has to be worn and handled properly. And nobody does. I'm going to go back to the very beginning, back to, I think this is March of 2020, and I'm going to quote Saint Anthony Fauci, the patron saint, the Pope of all things COVID. And here is what he said. And this was on CBS News on their 60 Minutes program. And I've linked it below for those who want to fact check. While masks may block some droplets, Fauci said, they do not provide the level of protection people think they do. Wearing a mask may also have unintended consequences. People who wear masks tend to touch their face more often to adjust them, which can spread germs from their hands. But there is another risk to healthy people buying disposable masks as a precaution. The price of face masks is surging, and Prestige Ameritech, the nation's largest surgical mask manufacturer, is now struggling to keep up with the increased demand. Face masks are vital for healthcare providers and for patients with confirmed or suspected COVID-19. For healthy people, both the World Health Organization and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention recommend they wear masks only when taking care of those who are sick or suspected of having the virus. For those who need to wear a mask, the WHO, the World Health Organization, The WHO emphasizes the proper way of wearing one. Put the mask on with clean hands. Remove it from behind without touching the front. Wash hands immediately after removing it. Dispose of it properly, and never reuse a single-use mask. Now, there's an aspect in that little snippet that people have latched onto because Fauci, World Health, Theresa Tam, Dr. David Williams in Ontario were all preaching from the same songbook, from the same hymn, singing from the same hymnal, saying that masks can have unintended consequences. They can make things worse because people touch the outside of the mask and then they touch their eyes, nose, mouth, then they touch all manner of common surfaces, and you just get spread. It's called cross-contamination. But people latched on to the fact that they made the point that it was increasing demand for masks, and that was precluding those who genuinely need them, like a doctor going into OR who doesn't want it when he's standing over someone's open gaping wound and doesn't want his spittle when he says pickups, scalpel, retraction. He doesn't want spittle falling into a gaping open wound. Post-operative infections are common. So he need that individual, he or she, that someone in an OR talking needs a mask. And on top of that, there are bodily fluids that sometimes spray out, and the doctor needs protection. Somebody wonder, why do I have a mask when I consider them absolutely totally useless in the context of the way people wear them? It's because I had a job previously for a bit, and they gave me a whole box of these wrapped in plastic, single-use masks. You see these all the time. Got the little folded folds. It's meant to be worn once, and once it's removed, it's to be thrown away. But no one does that because we're cheap. We throw it into our pocket. We pull it out of our pocket. I mean, it's brain dead stupid the way that people wear masks. But they were the law. And that information, again, there's a link for the World Health Organization continues to give that advice. So was it that was demand for masks driving scarcity and precluding hospitals and people who actually need them and know how to use them properly from getting them? Yes, that was an issue. But that doesn't change or alter in any way the fact that if you're going to wear a mask, one, wear the proper type, not this loose-fitting crap. It's a viral aerosol less than a micron in size. If you think this is going to stop a viral aerosol, well, then I'll give you a shopping cart to transport sand in. It's stupid. So get the right type. And that means an N95 respirator with a quality filter apparatus on it or better. And then has to be tightly sealed to the face, meaning, guys, you can't have a beard. Okay. I see guys with the full-blown lumberjack ZZ Top type beard wearing a mask. Have you got 2 IQ points to rub together? So wear the proper, first it has to be the proper type, and then it has to be worn and handled properly, and no one does. And I remember I was talking to a kid on the tennis courts last year, young kid, 20-ish, had just graduated law school, I believe. So, smart guy. You have to have a certain degree of intelligence to pass the bar. And he, I enumerated all those points to him that they're stupid. And he made the point, he said, well, it helps remind people that there's a pandemic on. It's a visual reminder that there's a pandemic going on. So we're doing something. And as Saint Fauci said himself, I got to scroll back. While masks may block some droplets, Fauci said, they do not provide the level of protection people think they do. Wearing a mask may also have unintended consequences. Why? Because people who wear masks tend to touch their face more often to adjust them, which can spread germs from their hands. So, wearing a mask may have unintended consequences. And if people adjust them, touch the outside, spreading germs around. Well, there's no if about it. Everyone does that. You see it every day. I mentioned in a previous video, there's a guy I work with who scratches his nose constantly, and he's handling products that are going out onto store shelves. Touch products, cross-contamination, fomite transmission. Welcome to disease spread. I was going to share one other article, and I've linked it down below as well. And this is infection control epidemiologist from the University of Toronto. And he's quoted in the CBC News article as saying a mask, you're breathing on it all day long, creating all this wonderful space for bacteria to multiply. And once they get to a certain quantity, you start inhaling them. So both his name is Dr. Colin Furness. He's not a medical doctor, he's an epidemiologist. And epidemiology is not a medical degree, it's more of a, it's about theories and ideas about how to maybe control the spread of viral of pathogens, viruses, and otherwise. And so it's not, it's not medical, it's more mechanical. But anyway, a mask, you're breathing on it all day long, creating all this wonderful space for bacteria to multiply. And once they get to a certain quantity, you start inhaling them. He was citing in that article peer-reviewed science that was published to the British Medical Journal in 2015 with respect to the fact that in a peer-reviewed scientific study that was published to the BMJ, they found that healthcare workers who wore cloth masks for 4 or more hours per day, that they had a 1,300% increased risk of developing a respiratory infection versus the background rate. And to break that down, if anyone's unclear, within the general population, there's a certain number of people, there's a certain level of bacterial or respiratory infections. They happen. People get respiratory infections even without masking or anything else going on. That's the so-called background rate. Well, if you put a cloth mask on your face, the study done by this Australian team that they published to the British Medical Journal, they found that wearing a cloth mask for plus hours a day over, I think their study period was 4 weeks, they found that it increased the risk of a respiratory infection as compared to the general population. You were 13 times, 1,300% more likely to develop a respiratory infection than the general population. And that was for cloth masks. For medical masks, which this would fall into that category, it was double the risk, 200% risk. So you're twice as likely to develop a respiratory infection even from these versus the general population. So masking has always been stupid. But people drowning in fear will grab at an anchor, and that's, initially they said don't grab on. Let's leave these to the let's not damage the supply. Let's not crimp the supply that healthcare workers who are trained on how to use and handle them properly, let's make sure they have what they need. And you people who don't have any clue about, who wear it like a chin strap and are idiots, don't wear one, because you're going to touch the outside and touch all manner of things and make things worse. And then we forgot about that, and people pretend that, well, they only said not to wear them because they were worried about the supply. Stupid. So the big question is now, right now it is Sunday, the 2nd of October. And as I was saying at the beginning, you know, it's tempting. It's so tempting to just say, okay, it's over. It's over. We can go back to normal. Let's start planning the vacation. Let's start, living life the way life was meant to be lived. And the fear is that um, people, the general population, too many of them, all they'll have to do, the temperatures now in my corner of Ontario, we have a frost warning in effect. We're starting to see temperatures overnight dip into the single digits, getting down in and around, getting close to zero. And when that happens, we know this is influenza season, flu season. And we've seen it with COVID as well. COVID goes up. And so what's going to happen now? I leave it as an open question as to whether monkeypox will transmit more widely during the cold weather months, because according to published research that's on the pubmed.gov site, um, that's from the National Institutes of Health, the organization St. Anthony Fauci heads, at least for another few months, I believe. The monkeypox, that virus, does exist in aerosols. So it has, at least, I believe, the potential to be airborne, or it is airborne, but it has the potential to transmit that way. Has it so far? Doesn't appear to be. All the scientific research, all the papers, all the reporting on it says that the overwhelming prime driver of transmission is intimate skin-to-skin contact. And that's like basically all the cases, I believe. Even in households where it's not skin-to-skin contact, they say that someone with the lesions lies down in a bed, and then a child maybe goes and lays in that bed, and they get infected that way, because these open sores, if they're on the legs or if they're anywhere, if they get into the linens, someone coming in afterward can get it that way. But SARS-CoV-2 wasn't airborne for months, and then it was. They finally proved it was, in fact, existed in airborne aerosols. And that's when they brought in the stupid masking rules without the requisite literacy on proper handling and wearing procedures. And the simple fact of the matter is, no one donning and doffing procedures, proper wearing and handling of masks is so incredibly labor intensive. You have to be meticulous, and no one's going to be. You're not going to get people working in retail stores who are there for 5, 6, 8, 9 hours. They're not going to, they'd have to go through 3 or 4 of these a day. Anytime you take it off, well, then it has to be thrown away. You want to destroy the environment? These are petrochemicals. These are a product of the petrochemical industry. So you have it in for big oil? Well, not if you love your masks. You should buy stock in Dutch Shell, because you're blowing up their profit when they take barrels of oil out of the Bering Sea, or Texas, or wherever Saudi Arabia, wherever the oil is coming from. Petrochemicals are huge. I actually think most of a barrel of oil goes into things other than gasoline. But that's getting way, way, way off topic. Enough for now. I'll end it there, but this world's gone mad. And if things, I want to start living. But my fear is that when things, all that it'll take is for the authorities to come down with whatever draconian measures they are. And the only thing I would implore, we need more people questioning. More people questioning. Yeah, you know what? It's a tiny fringe. It's a tiny fringe of the population that actually dares to question things. And we need more. We need more than a fringe who are engaging their minds and are willing to question. Remember, back in school, those of you who took liberal arts, remember you were told, you were instructed, you were encouraged to question. Get back to that. Don't just roll over and do whatever you're told without questioning. Question everything. Good night.